person talk at a particular location in Saskatoon or Regina or another location to present on something prairie conservation or species at risk related. So this presentation will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, so keep your eye open for that and feel free to pass the link around to anyone who you think might be interested or who couldn't make this webinar. At the end of the presentation, I will show you where the links to the webinars can be found on our website and on our YouTube page. So there are 67 people registered for this webinar, so that's great. Thanks very much everyone coming out. We have 3 speaker series presentations coming up in May, so it's a very exciting month for us. We will first have Dr. Jeff Holroyd, a retired biologist from Environment Canada. He will be in Val-Marie for an in-person speaker series on May 12th to talk about burrowing owl conservation. On May 25th, we will be at Winston's English Pub and Grill in Saskatoon for the Nature City Festival, where Rennie Grills from the Meewasin Valley Authority will be speaking about invasive species and what we can do to help prevent the spread of those invasive species. On May 28th, we will be at the Wings Over Wascana Festival in Regina, and we'll have Danae Freyer from the Royal Saskatchewan Museum there, speaking about the importance of native pollinators on our prairies. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, on the left side of your webinar pop-up menu that's on your screen, there is a place to type in questions, so feel free to ask those questions there, and I will moderate questions at the end. Please direct your questions to the organizer only. I would like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for this project has been given by the First Nations University of Canada. Now, a bit about Fidji and Malin. Fidji Gendron is an associate professor of biology at the First Nations University of Canada. She is interested in traditional uses of native plants and has worked with several elders to develop teaching tools to promote these plants. She is also part of a group that investigates bioactive components in these native plants. Malin Hansen is a plant ecologist who is currently teaching biology at the First Nations University of Canada. She has an interest in native plant restoration and has been involved in several restoration projects around Regina. She often gives public workshops on how to use native plants in gardening and hopes to inspire more people to grow native plants. All right, so with that, I will pass control over to you, Fidji, to start the presentation.
Okay, so you can hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. As Kayla said, yes, I work at the First Nations University, and we'll start our talk, Natural Urban Landscape, Growing Native Plants. Right, so my name is Malin, and I will start talking a little bit about what a native plant is, and we'll also talk about non-native plants and how they compare to each other and what a wildflower is. So a native plant is a plant that is native to Saskatchewan in our case, and that means that it's been growing here for many thousands of years, and some of them might be unique to Saskatchewan, but we might also find them in other prairie provinces. And what's important is that it's been adapted to the conditions here, so the weather, the climate, and the soils, and so on. Now, a non-native plant, on the other hand, has been introduced to Saskatchewan. So that might be accidentally, or it might be by, planted here by choice. So sometimes we plant species in our gardens that are not necessarily native to Saskatchewan, and there is a chance that they might actually move into more natural areas. A wildflower is very sort of unspecific. A wildflower can be, often it's a name that you see in the store, but it doesn't actually necessarily mean that it's native to Saskatchewan. It might be native to other places. It might even have been bred to look more pleasant in gardens. So we want to be kind of careful when we think about wildflowers and when we see them in the store, because they might not actually be native to Saskatchewan. We also wanted to bring up the concept of cultivars. So cultivars might be some of the species that you find in in stores, in garden stores, they might originally be a species that is native to Saskatchewan, but they might have been bred, or they might have been enhanced to show certain characteristics like colors and size. And so they are also not necessarily considered native to Saskatchewan because they have been altered through breeding to show different characteristics. And that might mean that they're actually not so adapted to the conditions here. They might look better, but they might not actually grow better, and they might not be drought tolerant. So those are also problems, especially if we want to garden with native species. So let's talk a little bit about weeds and invasive plants. So weeds, to begin with, is really just it's not a very specific definition because it is just any species really, or any plant that is unwanted in a place where you are gardening or growing plants. So that could be native, it could be non-native. But when we talked about non-native plants, of course, before, we talked about plants that were not native to Saskatchewan. Invasive plants are often weeds, but they are plants that are particularly sort of invasive, spreading quickly and invading into gardens or areas that you are planting. And they also might be invading into natural areas beyond your garden. So they are problematic both for your garden and for areas surrounding your garden, or even areas outside the city.
Okay, so why landscape with native plants? Well, the good thing about these plants is that they're adapted to the type of environment that we have here on the prairies. So it means that they require less water. What like when I grow native plants, because I have some in my front yard, is the first year we have to baby them, like to water them like you would with other plants. But once that they grow their root system, which goes fairly deep into the soil, they don't require as much water. So that's the good thing. If you're kind of a lazy gardener like me, they have natural defenses to the pests here, so you don't have to use pesticides. Native plants, I don't even remember a species that has been damaged by insects, so they're pretty resistant. You don't need fertilizers. If you do add fertilizers, it's mostly going to be for the weeds. So native plants can grow on poor soil. So less fertilizers, less pesticides, less water, so that's, well, fewer inputs. It provides biodiversity because one of the great things that I like about the native plants at my house is especially during the fall, like in September and October, I have like the blue aster, smooth aster, that is pretty much one of the only ones that will grow at that time, like at the end of the semester, and there's always lots of insects around it, like bees and other pollinators, so that's great. It promotes prairie conservation, well, yeah, because a lot of insects will rely on them. And again, since you don't use pesticides or fertilizers, there's less pollution.
This time of the year is a really good time to kind of get into gardening with native species. And in May, well, April and May, which we're coming up pretty quick here, is a time when you want to think about what species to use, what goals you have in mind with your gardening, and how much time you have, what type of areas that you can plant in, and so on. So we'll just go through some of them so that you can kind of consider if this is something you want to do this year. So the goals with native plant gardening could be, of course, that you want to actually learn more about native species, which is a great goal. It could be that you actually want to educate people around you about the importance of native species and the conservation of native species. It could be to, of course, celebrate your natural heritage and, of course, the conservation of thereof. Save money, save time, because, as Fidji said, gardening with native species is often less time consuming and resource consuming, at least, especially the second and third year. It's also a great way to create a habitat for birds and butterflies and other insects. So it really increases the biodiversity of your yard. So something to think about is what location you want to be using. What kind of yard do you have? Is it very shady on the front, or is it sunny in the back? Do you have a good spot where you actually want to do your gardening? How big is it? How much sun does it get? And those things are important to take into account when you pick the species that you want to use. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. And resources, of course, how much time do you have this first year? Because the first year is the year that takes a little bit more time and maybe money as well to put into this. You want to think about what kind of design you want to use for your garden, and you might even want to discuss it with neighbors, or at least talk to them about what you're planning on doing. It's depending on, of course, where this is going to be located. If it's in the front, you might want to just talk to them, and it's also a really good opportunity to educate them about these things. You, of course, want to look into what's available in your area, availability of seeds and seedlings and so on, and we will discuss that shortly.
Okay, so when you garden with native plants, one thing that you have to know is that the first year, what the plants will do is that they will grow their root system. So most of the growth will be underground, so you won't really see what's going on, and maybe they won't flower the first year, but they will flower the year after. So on the picture, what you see is a patch, like on the right side, that's a patch that I started in 2009, and I took the picture in 2010. So you see that the patch that was like 2 years old, they had flowers, they were very big plants, very healthy plants. But if you look on the left side, that's a new patch that I had started that summer in 2010. So the summer that they were planted, they don't really look very interesting. They don't even flower. So it takes some time, but eventually they will look like the patch on the right. So what I'm saying here is just be, it takes some time.
And here's another picture that kind of illustrates what Fidji was just talking about too. This is a yard, a front yard that has, with a family that's been using a lot of native species, and so they took a picture in 2008 where when they had just started planting a few species. So they had planted some shrubs in the front, as you see by the rocks there. They already had native grass in the lawn, so you can actually, if you look closely, you can actually see that that's blue Grama. And we'll talk a little bit about the different species and what to plant in a few minutes, but to a trained eye you can actually see that that's blue Grama. They grow really short. It's nice lawn grass. By the door you can actually see some plants being planted as well, but of course, as Fidji said in the beginning, you don't have a lot of flowers. Now take a look at what happened 3 years later, 4 years later. The shrubs have grown up really nicely. I think these are probably some buffalo berries, 2 different kinds of buffalo berries, maybe some cinquefoil shrubs in there as well. Native, of course, native shrubs. There are many nice native shrubs that you can use for gardening as well. By the door now you can see that you have both coneflowers and black-eyed Susan, probably some bergamot in there as well, and we'll look at that a little closely later. Yeah, and so this is another image of something to take into account when you garden with native species as well, and that is that it will look different in different times of the year. Something smart to do when you garden with native species is to choose species that flower early and flower late in the same area, so therefore you can have a flower bed that flowers all through the summer. You know, there are native plants that are flowering right now. In fact, outside here at the First Nation University, we actually have prairie crocuses flowering today, and there is also three-flowered avens that are flowering early. And then later on, you will have asters in the fall. So then, if you look on the left side, you can see that's June. So in that flower bed, there is not that much flowering in June. Now, they could have picked flowers that do flower in June, like flax and a few other species.
Earthleaf Alexanders.
Right. And as you see, though, in July, a lot more happening, right? There is yarrow, there's coneflowers, there's bergamot, so those are just, that's just a bed that looks different in different times of the year.
Okay, so if you want to start your own patch with native plants, what we would recommend is that you get rid of what's already there. Well, unless it's a flower bed, then you can add your native species, but I know that what I did on my front yard is I had to dig up the grass. If you have weeds there, you also want to get rid of them. So what you can do is you dig them up, or you get rid of them. So you want to hopefully start with a clean patch with no weeds. So prepare soil for planting. That's mostly like getting rid of the weeds. And at the end of the presentation today, we will have a list of plants that are easy to grow, and we have some that will grow better in the shade and some that will grow better in the sun. So depending on the patch of land that you have, you will want to choose different plants. These are just some examples of weeds that we have here at the First Nations University. So these, while we're not allowed to use herbicides, so these are, well, we have to dig them up. So that's how we get rid of them. At your place, you can also try to smother the plants. Okay, so do you go with seeds or seedlings? It's actually hard to find seeds, to buy seeds. Malin will talk about seeds in a few minutes. I'll just, well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's talk a little bit about seeds before we go on to compare whether you should grow plants from seeds or whether you should buy the seedlings themselves. There are a number of places to get native seeds on the prairies. Some of them are located in Saskatchewan, but others are also located in Manitoba and in Alberta. And as long as you kind of buying species that are native to the prairie ecozone of Canada, it's okay. But of course, the more local, the better. It's always better to pick as local as possible. But as Fidji said, buying seeds is not always that easy. And as you see, we just have an image here of a seed mix that you may see, even in your garden stores, you might actually see this type of a container, native grass and wildflower mix. Now, we caution against this type of product just because it says native grasses and native wildflowers, but where are they native to? Most likely not Saskatchewan, right? So this is where you want to be cautious and think what you actually want in your garden and whether they are local to Saskatchewan or not. We do want to talk a little bit about collecting seeds. Collecting seeds can be a really good way to obtain seeds for your garden. It's also a very educational event. However, you can't just go out and collect in natural areas outside the city. Provincial parks, national parks, it's prohibited to collect seeds in those areas. Places where you can collect seeds would be private lands, of course, if you have obtained permission from the landowner. Also community pastures, if you contact the rural municipality beforehand. So those are good places to go, but you do need permission. And if you know someone who lives outside the city on an acreage where they do have native species, try to make contacts and try to actually let them show you around, and maybe you can collect some seeds. That's probably one of the better ways to actually get a good seeds for planting. So seeds are obviously, we'll talk about seedlings later, but compared to seedlings, seeds are usually cheaper. But you have to consider where you start them and how fast they grow. So you can start them indoors, just as if you were starting, say, tomatoes. A lot of people plant tomatoes inside and then plant them outside in May after the frost. And you can do exactly the same thing with seeds. We've actually done that quite a few times when we plant our native gardens here at the First Nation University and other places. We do plant them either at home or in greenhouses and then plant them out in May. So that's one way, which is probably the easiest way, or I should say the most successful way. You can obviously plant them straight on the ground. This is the best thing to do is actually do it in the fall, and the reason for that is that many of the seeds actually need a cold treatment to germinate, and so you can do that in your own freezer. You can actually put the seeds in the freezer, but the easiest way is just actually to put them in the ground in the fall and let them germinate in the spring. And this might also be particularly good just because there is often a little bit of moisture in the ground in the spring, and that will also benefit the seeds when they start germinating in April and May. If you use seeds, it's important that you keep the area moist for a while, especially in May when they are germinating, and probably into June and maybe even July as well. When you have really, really small seedlings, they need a little bit of water and help to get started. And of course, it all depends on what kind of germination rate you want. If you're fine with really low germination rate, of course, you don't have to baby them as much. But if you really want as much germination as possible, you do want to keep the area moist and under control. Using seeds or planting seeds will take longer. They will be really, really small, and you of course also have to know how these species look like when they are small, so that you don't weed them away. So you probably want to wait and weed later on when you can identify whether they're actually the native species that you planted or if they're weeds. And again, it's important to remember, like Fidji said, most native species will not flower the first year. Some will, and we'll talk about what species that actually do flower the first year, because it's good to collect some of, or to plant some of those just to get that reward, right? So here we're just showing an image of some native species at the very early stage. So on the right here, you can actually see, yeah, I forgot the name now, but it's blazing star actually. And they don't look much to begin with at all. They actually almost look like a grass. But once you get a trained eye, once you know that this is blazing star that shoot up just a little bit of a blade like that, one single blade to begin with, then you will know that, and then next time you know that you don't want to weed it away. But it can be hard to identify these species at the very beginning.
And just to come back to these seeds were planted in a container because, yeah, like the first time that you try planting native seeds, you don't know what they look like. So when it's time to weed, are you weeding the right thing? But if they're growing in a container like that, then it's easier for the weeding process. So if you do buy seedlings, there's a few places where you can buy seedlings. We have a list at the end where we can recommend a few places where you can buy seedlings. But usually, like even in Regina, I'm not really sure where we can buy seedlings. But if you do find a place, you'll see that they're more expensive. There's less available. Also, they will flower more quickly than if you start with seeds. So that's great. And if you do buy some seedlings, or you started with seeds and now you have these seedlings in your house, well, you would treat them the same way that you're treating your tomato plants. Like, you won't put them outside the first day that it's nice, right? Like the first day you'll leave them outside just for an hour, and then you'll bring them inside the house. The next day you'll leave them outside for 2 hours in the shade, of course, just so that they get used to the intensity of the sun, which is way higher outside than in your house. And you want to, well, here we have that we have to plant them after the last frost. That's, well, yes, like if you want to do the best, you can wait until the last frost. I know that a few years ago I got excited. I planted my seedlings in my front yard, and then it was this big frost. And I also had like commercial plants, and these died, but my native plants, they were pretty robust. Like, they're used to these kinds of extreme weather, so they're not as fragile as the other species. If you are in Regina, Malin and I, and there's a friend of us who will join us, we are going to give, well, the same information in plant workshops. There's one on May 3rd and one on May 24th, and on the one on May 24th, we're going to give away some seedlings, native plant seedlings. What I do is in the fall, sorry, I harvest seeds at the First Nations University because we have native species, and also at my house. And we have a nice partnership with the Sask Power Shan greenhouse in Estevan. So I send them the seeds, and they grow the seedlings for us, and they bring them back to Regina in May. So in May we have some native plant seedlings available, and we will maybe be at Wings Over Wascana and we'll give away some seedlings there as well.
Right, so here's this same house that we actually looked at a few minutes ago. So we just wanted to show here too that when you have a native grass lawn, so like I said, this is blue grama, mostly blue grama, I think. It can be mowed, but I also think we have another picture where it's not mowed. So here is one where it's not mowed, and I can see that because I can still see the seed heads, and I recognize the blue grama. Blue grama grass is really beautiful. It almost looks like an eyelash. Their seed head looks like an eyelash. So, and as you see, even when it's unmowed, it doesn't actually grow that tall. So it's a good grass species that way.
Okay, so now we're going to show you some examples of native prairie gardens. Well, these are examples in Regina. So, of course, we have the prairie at the First Nations University. So that's just outside the building. So we see bergamot, we see the Prairie Coneflower. The big challenge in this prairie is to get rid of the weed. We also, like the green shoots that are sticking out, that's absinthe. So that's a very aggressive weed. So yeah, so it's hard to get rid of the weeds in that location. We also have the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. So that's at the corner of College and Albert. They have a small native prairie.
And this is a private yard, actually, and this particular one is for a person in Saskatoon. And this one, of course, is very successful and not that difficult to put together, actually. Sorry. Coneflowers, lots of coneflowers, and we'll talk about coneflowers being one of the easiest species in a few minutes. They always grow, flower easily and flower a lot the first year. And as you can see here, they look very pleasant in a flower bed. There's also black-eyed Susan in here. There is asters, which often flower late in the season, which is nice to add to a flower bed. There is prairie clover at the very back, purple. There's lots of bergamot to the very right. And there's probably some blazing star purple at the very back too.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have a list of species. There's like a slide per species, and they're good starter species, and we're gonna say a few words about them. So the first one is the wild blue flax. Of course, I don't know if we mentioned it, but a lot of these plants are perennial, so you plant them one year and they'll grow back the following year, so that's great. You don't have to buy new plants every year. That's a species that you'll plant in a sunny area, and well, not the first year, but once that it's established, it can grow in very dry conditions, so you can forget to water it and it will do just fine. We have Heartleaf Alexanders here, so that's another one that will flower early in the growing season, so in June. It will tolerate a little bit of shade. It says moist conditions. We have it at the First Nations University, and we never water the plants there, and it does fine. So it's another one that could grow in moist condition, but if you forget to water it, it will do fine.
Wild mint is a nice, of course, nice addition to your garden too, because it's edible, or you can make, you can put it in salads, you can make tea out of it, so it's always a nice one. Something to remember about mint is that it does tend to spread a bit, so which could be welcomed. It could be nice because you can actually use it as a cover in an area where you just want one species to grow quite quickly and cover the area. But of course, if you want to plant it together with other species, you might want to just remember that it is a fairly fast growing species, and it could be potentially taking over from other not so fast growing species. But of course, because it is edible, you could be eating it throughout the growing season. It also does fairly well in shady areas, so that might be one that you could put, in a tree area or in an area where you do have quite a bit of shade.
Okay, the next one. The next one is Yarrow. This one is pretty common around here. It's perennial. It grows well in the sun or shade. It's super drought tolerant, but it also spreads easily. That could be an advantage depending where it's growing. I know that on one side of my house it's pretty sunny, but we don't use that side of the house, so instead of having weeds, right now what I'm trying to do is to grow yarrow because it will spread and it will flower, so I'm happy with that. And I also have it in the front yard. Well, that's the thing. If it grows in a flower bed, it will invade the other species. I don't really mind about that. And the thing that I like is that it's spreading in my grass, and I think that's awesome because the grass is another thing that I don't really take care of, and yarrow is pretty drought tolerant. So it means that the grass will stay green for a longer time, right?
Prairie Sage, of course, is an excellent species to work with. It's quite easy to grow, quite easy to get started. It also tends to spread fairly quickly, but it is sun and partial shade tolerant, and really drought tolerant.
In your flower bed, you would want to have it at the back. I really like that species because that's what I was talking about. Like it will flower in September and October when most of the other species are done blooming. This one will flower at that time and it will be covered with insects. So that's a great plant.
Gaillardia is another really beautiful species. You know, if you grow this in your front yard, your neighbors will be happy, just because it is a very happy and sunny species. It also attracts a lot of butterflies, so that's usually very welcomed as well. This is probably one of the native species that really looks almost like a plant that you would buy in your garden centers. But of course, this particular one is native, and this is exactly how showy it looks without having been bred to look better, right? So we're really happy about this one, and it's fairly easy to grow. It doesn't usually flower the first year, so that could be the only the only problem. But of course, after that, it's very drought tolerant and flowers every year.
Okay, so that's here golden aster. That's a very short plant. So in your flower bed, that will be at the front. So it has like the flowers are not really big, but there's lots of them. So in the sun, and again, very dry conditions.
And I would really recommend this one just because growing this one, I remember how easy it was, and also another one that flowers the first year.
Yeah.
Prairie Coneflowers, another species that is easy to grow, flowers the first year usually, can spread and take over. So this one could be, of course, mixed with other plants in the flower bed, but this is usually the one that spreads and grows the fastest. So you might find that it crowds out a few other species, but beautiful. And of course, another really, really showy plant that is also drought and sun tolerant.
Yeah. That's the blue Grama grass. So I don't know if you remember the picture, like this house with the different, like the shrubs and the different species. So that was their grass. So their grass was blue Grama grass. So that's when they're like blooming.
Yeah, and it's a fairly short grass again. So
yeah.
It's optional mowing it, but it can be mowed, of course, but maybe you find that you don't have to because it is fairly short. June grass is another short species that can be used in a lawn. You might find that you want to mow it at some point in the summer, but you shouldn't have to mow it as often as you mow other species or other grass, other lawn species. It is a bunch grass, so it may not be useful or suitable as a lawn grass on its own, but together with blue Grama, it can make a really nice mix for a lawn.
Stiff goldenrod, so that's another one that once that you plant it, it will bloom in September and October. So along with smooth aster, it will be really beautiful when all the other plants are done growing.
Black-eyed Susan, another really showy plant, which your neighbors will like a lot. Fairly easy to grow as well. This one is often not perennial. It will probably grow for 2 years, but it's one of those short-lived native plants. So it probably will not flower the first year, but it usually flowers the second year, but then it might not come up again. So you might have to keep planting this one. Now, of course, it's going to shed its own seeds. So these flower beds with native species are going to reseed themselves quite easily.
Now we have Bergamot. That's another very beautiful plant. This one, it says sun, but I know that at my house I have one on the side of my house which is quite shady, and it does good. Like maybe the blooms are not as big as they would be in the sun, but it does fairly well in the shade and would do even better in the sun. It's a fairly tall plant, so that's one that you would have to put at the back of your flower bed.
Kenna Anemone is also a really nice ground cover. It can do fairly well in shady or part shady areas. Often this one in the prairies you would find in sort of tree grooves where you have underneath the trees and sort of tree areas. So often in part shade, maybe not straight out in the sun. A little bit of sort of moisture condition as well, but really beautiful.
We have the three-flowered Evans. That's one that will flower end of May, beginning of June.
Even sometimes even April.
Yeah, so that's a really beautiful one. On the right, you see the flowers. On the left, well, you also see the flowers, but I think it's the stamen, so it's the male reproductive structures that are kind of feathery. So it's also called prairie smoke, because if you have a field covered with this plant, you'll see all these feathery structures. So it's a really beautiful plant, and it's very nice pink. So that's another one that will do well in dry conditions, and it's not very tall. So yeah.
Prairie Sunflower is another, of course, showy species. This one is annual, which means that it will only actually grow and flower 1 year, and then it dies down. It can also be fairly weedy in a way, or fairly, like, it can invade areas, mostly because the seeds are quite, they germinate quite quickly. So it's an easy plant to grow, but it also spreads. So if you do plant it in your flower bed, you may see it popping up in other areas because the seeds will spread and they will germinate quite easy. But it's an easy plant to get rid of too, just because they, again, they're annuals. They're easy. If you do find them in unwanted areas, they can be pulled out pretty quickly. But it is a very beautiful species and really drought tolerant.
Okay, so we're done with the starter species. Here it's a summary of the plants that we've talked about. Well, some of the plants that we talked about. So if you have an area that's more in the sun, we recommend these plants. If you have an area that's more in the shade, or let's say that you have lots of trees in your backyard, well, these plants will do better. On here, I think that we've been mentioning that a few times during the talk. It's these native plants. They will bloom for a few weeks. Okay, it's not like petunias that you buy at Walmart and they will bloom for the entire summer. Native plants will bloom for a few weeks, a month, but the idea is that when you have like a native garden, you want to have different varieties, different species. So like, for example, the prairie crocus will flower right now, like early May. Well, actually in April, will flower in April. Three-flowered Evans. You want the Gaillardia. Well, Gaillardia will flower in June, July, maybe sometimes in August. Prairie Coneflower will flower at the same time as Gaillardia. Bergamot, that's one that will flower a little bit later during the growing season. And if you want to have plants that will flower in the fall, well, smooth Aster and stiff Goldenrod would be good plants to use.
And we talked already a little bit about native lawn alternatives, which we're really excited about, of course, because we think that lawns in Saskatchewan, you know, they take a lot of resources, fertilizers, and water. So we really do want to promote the use of native lawn alternatives. So Fidji already talked a little bit about yarrow, especially the the leaves of yarrow make a really, really nice grass, or lawn rather, and they can be mowed to make an even sort of lower sort of grass, because of course if it's cut a few times a year, the flowers will actually start becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. So then it will be a nice sort of short lawn that will stay short throughout the season. We talked about blue grama already. We talked about June grass. Buffalo grass might be tricky to find seeds, but it can make a nice lawn. Three-leaved sedges. If you find seeds for sedges, they can be very good as well.
So these are the online resources that some of them we have tried. I know that Prairie Originals, they're near Winnipeg, but you can order seedlings. What they do is that you buy the seedlings and they will ship the seedlings by bus. So I've done that a few times and it worked really well. The Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan, if you go onto their website, they have more resources that you can try. And there's this Facebook web page with information about the upcoming workshops. So we are done. So what I'm going to do is I will pass the mic over to Kyla.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you very much for doing that talk. I think it's very interesting and very pertinent to this time of year. So I hope people got a lot of good ideas about what to plant and maybe what to do in their yards this spring and summer. I will include Fidji and Malin's email. You'll get a follow-up email, I believe, tomorrow. So if you do have any further questions or comments for them, please feel free to email them and touch base with them. Also in the follow-up email, you'll get just a few follow-up questions for us that will really help us with our granting report. So if you could just take the couple minutes to fill out a few questions, that'd be great. So again, I would like to take a moment to note that in-kind support for this project has been given by the First Nations University of Canada. And I don't see any questions up yet, so I'll just take you to our website here to show you where our speaker series presentations are listed, and then feel free to type in any questions in the meantime. So if you go to our website, pcap-sk.org, under the Communications tab here, if you click on Native Prairie Speaker Series, all of the links to the past presentations will be here, and those will take you directly to our YouTube page. So you can actually look at all of the videos from our past presentations. So as well, on our website, you can find all of the links to our social media accounts on the bottom here. So you can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And I see a few questions pop up here. So could you put the slide back up that showed a list of plants? It was right before the slide that showed when the plants bloomed. Maybe I'll just pass control back over to you for a second for that.
Okay. So this one, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Perfect. Let her look at that again. Okay, someone just wants to type in something quickly. I think I lost my question box. I think I closed it. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Will the presentation be available online? Yes, I did. Yes, I will put that up on our YouTube page, so everything will be up again there, and you can look at anything again. Question. I have a question about Prairie Sage. Are there any non-native look-alike, smell-alikes to avoid confusing it with? I'm thinking of a sage-smelling plant that looks similar in a nearby park and wondering if it is really Prairie Sage.
Well, there's the two that are, well, the one that is the most common one is Prairie Sage, and that's the one with the wider leaves. There's also Pasture Sage, and this one is a little bit darker, but the leaves are kind of feathery.
Yeah, fringy, yeah.
Yeah. In the park, well, I don't know which park you're talking about, but I know that around Westcana Park here, there's also another sage, and it's called the absinthe that I was telling you about. Like if you take the leaves and you break it between your fingers, it has a very strong smell. It's not as nice as the native sage. So this one is introduced. It's not native to here. There's also a type of sage that's more like a shrub. It's not as common. I haven't seen it. Well, Prairie Sage is the most common one. Yeah.
Great, perfect.
Well, I would say that often in gardens and especially in parks, they may use other sages that are native to, southern U.S., California, because they are maybe more available and more commercialized than the native species to Saskatchewan. So I think, unfortunately, they pick what's available and what's commercialized in when they landscape bigger areas such as city parks and so on. So yeah, I think that those are commercialized and not native here, and most likely native to southern U.S.
Perfect, thank you. A few questions coming in now. How easy is it to grow wild tiger lilies?
I would, none of us have actually done it. You haven't done it either. I would probably think it's fairly difficult, but we haven't tried, and we don't think it's easy to find seeds or seedlings either. So that finding seeds might be the trickiest thing, and but even growing it can be hard. It does grow in fairly moist conditions, as far as I know. So, but yeah, it's always worth trying. We have tried new species that are hard sometimes, and it can be really rewarding. But it might be, something you have to pay a lot of, or spend a lot of time working on.
Right. Okay. For someone who has a vegetable garden and has limited space because of that, what would be your top 2 or 3 natives to plant?
I would say Gaillardia for sure, because it is a very rewarding and one of my favorites, because it is so beautiful and fairly easy to grow. So that would be my pick. What would be your pick?
Well, if it's a vegetable garden, you might want to try bergamot, because the bergamot plant is actually the one that is used for the Earl Grey tea. So you can use the leaves as a tea.
Ah.
And it's, of course, very beautiful, too. So yeah, those, and Gaillardia and Bergamot would actually complement each other in color, because you would have the yellow from the Gaillardia and the more purple pink from the Bergamot.
Ah, very interesting. Good point. I'm curious about how to plant blue grama as a lawn grass. How do you collect that many seeds to plant, or do you buy a native grass mix?
Well, it would be hard to pick unless if the person knows someone who is owning land in an area with native grasses. Blue grama is one of the more common ones. So when we harvested blue grama in we used to have a nursery. We were actually mowing or even vacuuming the seeds from the area, or from the area where the blue grama seeds or blue grama grass were growing. So that would be, you couldn't really pick it by hand. You would have to use some kind of machine or a lawnmower or sort of a vacuum cleaner to do it. So that can be tricky. You might want to try a seed mix or even a seed source. So Blazing Star Seed Company most likely would have blue Grama, and they are located in Manitoba too, I think, or are they Alberta? I can't remember.
I think they're in Saskatchewan.
Are they? Yeah. So Blazing Star Seed Company is one of the better companies that we know of, and they are fairly local. So they probably have blue Grama.
Perfect. Thank you. Some good sources there for people to check out.
And I think that potentially there are places nowadays where you can, for landowners to actually grow native grasses, not forbs, not flowers, but native grasses in their pastures. And so it might also be worth it looking into more, more kind of agricultural companies for actually a grass if you're not looking for flowers at all. There might even be something in Regina if you're looking for grasses only. So that might be one source too.
That's a good point. Can these plants grow in clay soils?
Well, in Regina, I think that it's just clay soil. So yes, there's yeah, I don't even know what to say because I'm not from here, and when I moved here, it was like, oh my God, what is this soil? So yes, and they do well around here. So yes, they grow in clay soil.
Okay.
And they probably will condition it. Once, since native species might be the only thing that actually do grow well in an area where you haven't grown anything before, it could actually be a good conditioner, if you know what I mean. It actually might soften up the soil and actually make it easier as the year goes by.
Okay. Okay, a couple more questions here. Do any garden centers carry native plants, or are they all cultivars? How do you know the difference?
Well, I would say that pretty much all of them have cultivars rather than native species. It's possible that it's getting better and better, and of course you have to ask. But I know that most garden centers have plants that look very much like Gaillardia, but they have really odd colors. So what you should do is to get a good book of native plants and maybe even bring that to the garden store and make sure that it, well, not just have the look of a native plant, but it's good to know what you're looking for, but it's also important to ask, and they will of course tell you where they're from. But regular garden centers very, very rarely have native species. So the only places to really get them are those species, those stores or those companies that specialize in native seedlings, such as Prairie Originals. It's the only one that we know that actually specializes in native seedlings, right?
Yeah, but I think that, I might be wrong, but I think that last year, I can't remember where it was, but I went to a regular store, a greenhouse, and they had seedlings from Prairie Originals. Like I could see it on the name tag.
Okay, well that would be a good.
Yeah.
Then you know.
Yeah, so you can look at the tag too to see where they're from.
And always ask. I would always ask. Sometimes they don't know, but at least if you ask, you know more than if you don't ask. But like Fidji said, looking at labels, they might even say where their region is.
Perfect. Well, some good sources there for people, for sure. Good starting point. I just have a couple comments here. Someone says, I was able to grow a wood lily by digging up the whole flower with the bulb and planting it in a pot. It has come up this year and is a seedling right now. So there you go. Someone, I guess, successfully did do it. So it's just a point to always try or you'll never know, right?
Yeah, awesome.
And another comment here that Blazing Star Company is at Aberdeen, Saskatchewan.
Okay, perfect.
So if no one else has any other questions, that's all I have right here. Then I'll think we'll we'll call it a day, and I'll be posting the presentation hopefully later today up onto the YouTube page. So just keep an eye out for that on our website. And big thank you again to Fidji and Malin for doing this presentation for us. I think everyone learned a lot, and excited to get out there and maybe explore some native prairie options, that's for sure. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.